Have you ever felt like you talk and talk, and no one really listens? That the more you try to impress, the more you seem invisible. Maybe your problem is not in the what you say, but in how much you say. What if I told you that there was a skill simple, silent, and powerful that could completely transform the way people see you? Most people believe that the secret to getting noticed is having good stories or being the most charismatic in the room. But what if it's exactly the opposite? And if true power lies in being still at the right moment, letting the mystery speak for yourself? You Stoics, they've known this for centuries, and now you'll find out why. In this video, you will understand how the silence, when used strategically, can make you someone attractive, respected, and with a presence so strong that you just have to arrive to be noticed. And the best part? This requires no effort, no masks, no rehearsed speeches. It's just you, in control of your own energy. But be careful, the last part of this video contains a Stoic insight that will turn a key in your mind. If you skip it, you'll miss the very element that separates the ordinary men from the truly memorable ones. So, stay until the end. Now, take a deep breath, silence the noise around you, and let's understand the magnetic power of silence together. Have you ever noticed how, in a conversation circle, the person who talks the least tends to be the most watched? This is no coincidence. In a world that is always screaming for attention, the silence, it almost became a rebellion, and that's precisely why it attracts so much attention. Those who can remain silent transmit something rare: control, security, and a type of self-confidence that does not need external approval. Noise is common, but silence has can. We live connected all the time, bombarded by notifications, voices, and opinions. And that's where the secret lies: what is scarce becomes valuable. When you don't fill all the spaces with words, you become different. And the difference awakens curiosity. Instead of explaining yourself all the time, try remaining silent for a few seconds longer than usual. Watch. Let the other person wonder what you are thinking. That, my friend, is attention in the palm of your hand. We're not talking about becoming a Tibetan monk, far from it. It's about presence. The kind of presence that doesn't depend on words to be felt. When you master silence, your posture changes, your energy changes, and, without realizing it, you begin to influence the environment. People lean in to listen when you speak. And why? Because you don't waste your time trying to prove something. You only speak when it's worth it. You Stoics, they already understood this game centuries ago. For them, wisdom lay much more in knowing how to remain silent than in knowing how to speak. Epictetus, for example, said that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason: to listen more and speak less. And look, he lived in a time without Instagram, without podcasts, and without YouTubers with microphones glued to their mouths. Imagine what he would say today. If you really want to stand out, try doing the opposite of what most people do. Instead of competing to be heard, create silence around you. And see what happens. Because whoever dominates silence, dominates attention. And when you have people's attention, you have the chance to make a real impact. Imagine any small town, one of those where everyone wants to show up, speak louder, tell the best story. In this noisy scenario, Daniel appears an ordinary man, with no desire to be the center of attention. But he had something rare: he spoke little, and when he did, everyone stopped. He was neither shy nor arrogant, he just chose his choices well. Words. And that made his every sentence carry weight. At first, no one noticed Daniel. While others scrambled to tell of their achievements, he watched. I listened. Sometimes he just smiled or shook his head with that look that said more than an entire speech. Little by little, something curious began to happen. People began to wonder who that guy was, so quiet, but so gifted. The mystery around him, it grew effortlessly. It was at an informal meeting that someone finally asked Daniel, "Why do you talk so little?" He replied calmly, without rushing, "Because the words, they are like coins. If you spend without thinking, you lose money value." Silence. Looks crossed. And there, at that moment, many understood that they were in front of someone who was not speaking out of necessity, but out of intention. Control, and that imposed respect. Over time, his company became desired. Not because he was the funniest or the most charismatic, but because he made people feel heard, seen. Daniel was that rare guy who really listens. And when he opened his mouth, he brought clarity. He dominated the room without raising his voice. Was attractive not because of what he showed, but because of what he hid, and that affected everyone around him. What does this story show us? That you don't have to shout to be remembered. In a world full of anxious voices, the real highlight comes from those who know how to remain silent. Daniel was living proof that the silence, when used well, becomes can. And this is the kind of presence that you don't learn in public speaking courses, but rather in the subtle art of speaking only when it's really necessary. Have you ever had that feeling of talking too much and yet no one seems to take you seriously? It's as if the more you explain, the less you are heard. This happens because excess words, it dilutes the impact of what is really important. You Stoics, they knew that. For them, the essential thing was what remained after the silence, what didn't need to be explained 1,000 times to make sense. Talking less does not mean being apathetic. Quite the contrary. It means choosing the right moments to intervene with intelligence and presence. Imagine being in a conversation circle and, instead of rushing to give your opinion, you observe, listen, wait. When you finally speak, everyone pays attention. Because you don't talk to show off, you talk because there's something worth saying. That's it, can real. In practice, you can apply this today. Next time you're in a conversation, take a breath before responding. Ask yourself, does what I'm going to say now really add up? Or is it just noise? This little exercise will give you more control about the situation and make your speeches have more impact. A few well-placed words say more than an entire speech. The strategic silence, it also protects you. It prevents you from saying something in the heat of the moment and regretting it later. And you know what else? He gives you time. Time to think, to feel, to analyze the other. While those in a hurry spill everything they think, you filter. You choose. And this posture conveys trust, intelligence, and, above all, presence. Talking less is an act of courage. In a world that values exhibitionism and chatter, knowing how to remain silent is almost a superpower. You don't need to prove anything. When you master the habit of speaking only what is necessary, you automatically become more attractive. Because your speech stops being noise, and becomes something that is really worth listening to. There are people who think silence in a conversation is embarrassing. But what few know is that a well-made pause has more effect than any impactful phrase. The secret is in how you use the time between one word and another. It is in this space, in this invisible interval, that you create presence, transmit security and, without realizing it, leaves the other person mesmerized. Pauses, my friend, are the spice of speech. You know that good tension we feel in movies before an important revelation? Those seconds of silence that make us hold our breath. So it is. In real life it works the same. When you hold back your speech, when you let silence enter the rhythm of the conversation, you activate the attention of those who listen to you. The other leans in, waits, connects. Because well-placed silence is not absence, it is impact. Take the test. The next time you're speaking in public, or even in a regular conversation, insert a pause before saying something relevant. Notice how the environment changes. It doesn't have to be theatrical, just a brief moment. A breath. It shows that you have control about the conversation, about yourself, and about the other person too. And guess what? It makes you attractive in a way you never imagined. You Stoics, they understood the value of pausing as part of thinking. They knew that between the stimulus and the response there is a space, and that in this space lives our freedom. And also our charm. Pausing is a sign that you are present, aware, attentive. And this generates respect. Anyone who rushes to respond seems insecure. Anyone who pauses conveys dominance. So stop being afraid of silence. Start using it to your advantage. He is your emotional comma, your sign of wisdom, your trademark. And, above all, it's his way of saying I don't need to talk all the time to be noticed. Because sometimes, it's in the pause that you become unforgettable. There's something almost magical about people who say little, but who still or exactly because of that arouse the curiosity of everyone around them. You've probably come across someone like this, quiet, observant, and yet, impossible to ignore. This happens because the silence creates space for the other's imagination to work. And what is not completely understood becomes magnetic. The mystery: it is a powerful social magnet. The human brain hates gaps. When someone is silent, doesn't fully expose themselves, or doesn't try to explain themselves all the time, what happens? The minds of others begin to fill in the gaps. What does he think? Why didn't she say anything? And then the interest arises. Contrary to what many think, being reserved does not distance you from people. Puts you in a place where your presence is sought after. The great thing is you don't need to hide or act inaccessible. Enough listen more, talk less, and observe with intention. Show that you are present, but without revealing everything. Human beings value what they need to achieve. If you deliver everything at once, you lose value. But if you offer pieces little by little, intelligently, you create a relationship of constant attention. That's its social power pure. You Stoics, they knew it wasn't necessary to give their opinion on everything. They understood that not every thought deserves to be verbalized. And that there is more control in saving than in exploding. Silence, in this context, is not omission, it is selection. And this selection builds the image of someone who thinks before speaking, who feels before acting. And whoever lives like this, inevitably becomes attractive. So the next time you're in a social setting, resist the urge to fill every space with your ideas. Instead, allow the other to come to you. Be a solid presence, but keep a little of yourself. Because the mystery, well dosed, it doesn't go away. He invites. And those who learn this art discover that they don't need to make noise to be the center of attention. Have you ever noticed how rare it is to find someone who really listening? Most people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. They barely wait for you to finish a sentence and are already preparing the next one. And do you know what this generates? Superficiality. On the other hand, when someone really shuts up to listen to you, you feel it. You connect. It is in this space of silent attention that the most underrated social media of all. The real attraction, it's not about always having something intelligent to say, but about giving the other person space to express themselves. When you listen with presence, your gaze says, I'm here. I care. And that, my friend, is rare. It's precious. People feel valued. They feel like they can trust you. And all this without you saying a single word. The silence, in this case, becomes synonymous with affection. Want a practical exercise? Next time you're in a conversation, resist the urge to interrupt. Instead, look him in the eye, make a subtle nod, and wait. When responding, don't just throw out any opinion, ask a question. Show interest. Show that you listened in truth. Little by little, this will become a habit, and your presence will be perceived as something rare and welcoming. You Stoics practiced this type of deep listening. For them, talking without need was wasting energy. They preferred to observe, reflect, and only then and if necessary share something. Listening, for the wise men, was a way of studying the world. This was how they understood others and themselves. And this stance still conveys today respect, wisdom, and emotional balance. Remember, people don't want someone who talks all the time. They want to be seen, heard, understood. If you become this figure, you will see how your social life changes. You stop being just another person in the crowd and become the support point, the confidant, the person everyone wants around. And all this thanks to the ability to listen in silence. There is a stark difference between those who speak to be accepted, and those who remain silent because they know they don't need to prove anything. The silence, when born from self-mastery, has an impressive effect. It imposes respect. It's not arrogance, nor coldness. It's just the presence of someone who controls their emotions and knows that true power doesn't shout, it watches, waits and acts at the right time. Think about the great leaders you admire. Now reflect, do they talk non-stop or do they know the exact time to open their mouth? The most impactful ones have one characteristic in common: they speak little, but in depth. Your words, they carry weight because they come from silence. They use pauses, glances and gestures with precision. And when they finally speak, no one dares to interrupt. Because it exists authority in each choice. Want to test this in everyday life? Next time you're in an environment with a lot of opinions being thrown to the wind, be silent for a few minutes. Listen to everything, observe the mood, analyze the arguments. Then, if necessary, speak calmly, without rushing. You will notice how your speech gains more space and how your presence begins to command the room even without raising his voice. You Stoics, they defended exactly that: the value of temperance, self-control, conscious action. For them, whoever reacts to everything loses the chance to act wisely. Knowing how to remain silent is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. People who talk all the time tend to get confused. But whoever masters his own silence demonstrates control and, consequently, conquer respect. Being respected has nothing to do with being feared. It has to do with conveying solidity. With showing that you know what you're doing even when you're not saying anything. The silence, used well, communicates that you are in charge. That you don't need to justify yourself. And in this world of noise and anxiety, that is more powerful than 1,000 well-rehearsed words. How many times have you said too much and then thought, I didn't need to say that? It happens. And a lot. In general, we talk too much out of anxiety, insecurity, or that desperate desire to fill the silence. But here's a simple and powerful truth: the more you talk, the less impact you make. And the more you save on words, the more they gain value. Less is more, always has been. People tend to measure intelligence by how much someone talks, but the reality is the opposite. Those who talk too much usually get lost in their own arguments. Those who speak little but with intention tend to be heard more. Why? Why broadcast control, clarity, and purpose? His words seem well chosen, refined. And that generates immediate respect. It is the effect of those who dominate their own silence. Apply this to everyday conversations. Instead of responding on impulse, pause. Think, does this really need to be said? If so, speak objectively. If not, smile, listen, keep your presence without forcing anything. Little by little, you will notice that people will start to listen to you more carefully. Because when you say little but deliver value, you become someone worth listening to until the end. This is one of the most striking lessons of Stoics. They knew that the word, when used in excess, becomes deflated. And that silence, when born from consciousness, is a sign of wisdom. Seneca said, rather be heard for a short time and with attention, than for a long time and without impact. In times of excess content, being concise is rare. And everything that is rare, is more attractive. So the next time you feel tempted to fill the silence for the sake of it, stop. Breathe. Let the empty space do the work. Sometimes saying nothing is exactly what will make you stand out. Because what is not said also communicates. And when you learn to let silence speak for you, you will discover that your value grows effortlessly. Talking too much is a treacherous habit. Sometimes you don't even realize it, but you're pouring out words just to escape the silence. And the worst part, the more you talk, the harder it is to realize what really matters. The truth is that too much talking reveals something you may not want to show: a lack of control. And this, instead of attracting, repels. Those who talk all the time lose mystery, presence, and, over time, respect. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to get lost in a conversation when you try to fill in all the blanks? We end up going into unnecessary details, repeating stories, going around and around. And when you realize it, the other person is already looking at their cell phone or yawning. That doesn't mean you're not interesting. It means you're trying show too much, when in fact the secret is in show less. Stoic practice is clear: if you have nothing essential to say, it is best to remain silent. Philosophy invites us to reflect before reacting, and this applies to both actions and actions. Words. You know that urge to interrupt with a random opinion or story? Take a deep and safe breath. Listening carefully and speaking only when necessary makes you a much better person. Attractive. Because you start to be seen as someone who knows the right time to take a stand. A good exercise is the following: when you feel like filling the silence, replace that desire with a question. Instead of delivering a long speech, lead the dialogue with genuine interest. This takes the focus off you, values others, and still positions you as someone wise, balanced, and mysterious. And yes, the mystery, it's part of the magnetism game. Nobody wants to discover everything at once. So the next time you realize you're just talking out of nervousness or insecurity, stop. Observe the environment. Collect yourself in your silence for a few seconds. You will notice how your presence strengthens. Because those who avoid talking too much are not less communicative, they are more strategic. And strategy, in this case, is exactly what will make you stand out among the noise of the world. There are people who believe that silence is the absence of communication. Nothing could be further from the truth. Even if you are silent, you are saying a lot. The way you cross your arms, the way you look, the way you position yourself in the room, all of this sends clear messages. Your body has its own language, and if you learn to master it, you will realize how your presence could be much more attractive than any rehearsed speech. Imagine walking into a room and, without saying anything, everyone notices you. This isn't about beauty or forced charisma, it's about posture. Shoulders open, head high, walk firmly. A calm look, which listens more than it judges. These signals create instant connection. What you doesn't say with words, say with the body. And guess what? This has more impact than 1,000 sentences thrown into the air. Want a simple exercise? Start observing yourself. How do you behave when you are silent? You transmit security or anxiety? Is it present, or does it seem like it wants to run away? The next time you're in a conversation, focus on your breathing, maintain eye contact, and relax your shoulders. This simple combination increases your authority and puts you in a balanced position. Anyone who feels good about their body automatically communicates this. You Stoics, they talked about coherence between what we think, feel, and express. For them, virtue was in the unity between mind, word, and action. Nonverbal language is precisely this bridge between what is inside and what we show outside. When you master this aspect, your silence becomes eloquent. You become that type of person who doesn't need to say anything to be taken seriously. So, never underestimate what your body is saying while you are silent. A good silence, combined with a firm posture and an attentive look, is a combo that few know how to use, but that generates a magnetic effect. In times where everyone tries to get attention with their voice, whoever communicates with bodily presence stands out effortlessly. And whoever stands out is remembered. Have you ever noticed that some people walk into a room and, even without saying a word, everyone notices? They don't ask for attention, they attract it. This happens because the true power of influence is not in the volume of the voice, but in the presence. When you are comfortable in your silence, conveys something rare: security without arrogance, authority without imposition. And that moves people. What happens is that, when you talk less, others start to fill the space with projections. They begin to imagine what you think, what you feel, what you know. This silent game awakens curiosity, creates a kind of magnetism that no amount of talk would be able to produce. You become an intriguing figure, and all without having to perform. The secret is to use silence as a strategy, not as an omission. But be careful: influencing without speaking is not about being silent all the time. It's about knowing when don't talk. It is understanding that silence, well positioned, has more strength than any argument. In an argument, for example, remaining silent can be the most powerful response. Not to shy away, but to show that you have control about your reactions. And those who have this internal control end up influencing everything around them. You Stoics, they already taught this clearly. For them, wisdom was in observing more and interfering less. The more you talk, the more likely you are to lose focus, to be misunderstood, to waste energy for nothing. But when you position yourself with balance and say only what is necessary, your words gain value and your influence grows without noise. If you want to become a reference, someone that others naturally seek out, stop trying to convince everyone all the time. Instead, be the kind of person who listens, who observes, who says little but with intention. The true influence, it does not come from those who try to control others, but from those who dominate themselves. And the silence is the best tool to get there. What's the point of being silent on the outside if your mind is screaming on the inside? The real ken of silence begins in the invisible, in what happens inside your head. The inner silence is what differentiates those who just keep silent from those who really have presence. Because there's no point in appearing calm if inside you're at war. A peaceful mind is the soil where the wisest attitudes and the most accurate words are born. People with mental calm, they convey something that cannot be faked. They don't need to rush, they don't react on impulse, they don't talk just to talk. They feel before they act. And this, as incredible as it may seem, is extremely attractive. Because in a world full of anxiety, being next to someone at peace becomes almost therapeutic. It's like finding a safe haven in the midst of chaos. You Stoics, they practiced this serenity every day. They meditated on death, reflected on what they could and could not control, and trained their minds not to be shaken by any external noise. This made them strong, centered, and influential all from within. And here's the big lesson: you don't control the world, but you can control your internal world. And that alone changes everything. Do you want to start developing this internal silence? Start with breathing. 10 minutes a day with your eyes closed, focusing only on the air entering and leaving your body. It seems simple, but it calms more than a lot of therapy. Another tip: before bed, turn off the screens, read an excerpt from Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, or simply reflect on what you learned that day. Peace of mind comes from repeating small habits. When you cultivate this kind of silence, your exterior changes effortlessly. His voice gains firmness. Your gestures become lighter. Your gaze, deeper. And the world starts listening to you without you saying anything. Because those who are at peace with themselves naturally attract. The real mystery lives in the minds of those who learn to remain silent, even in the midst of noise. And now I ask you, how much of what you say really matters? Have you been using your words as construction tools or as distractions to escape yourself? Maybe it's time to stop, breathe, and reflect: what could my silence say for me, if I had the courage to listen to it? The truth is that you don't need to talk more to be more. The path to true influence goes through listening, calm, self-control. And you can't learn that overnight. But it starts with a choice to use silence with intention, not out of insecurity. Because at the end of the day, silence isn't the absence of communication, it's a smarter way of expressing yourself. So I challenge you, in the next few days, practice strategic silence. Watch more. Talk less. Feel more. You will be surprised by the effect this has on your relationships, your energy, and even your self-confidence. Be someone who transmits presence, even when he's not saying anything. The world already has too much noise, be it the pause that makes an impact. If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel here and activate the bell. This way you don't miss the next videos with deep reflections, Stoic teachings, and practical strategies to evolve as a person. And tell me in the comments, what was the part of this video that moved you the most? Your experience may inspire other people to rethink the way they communicate with the world and with themselves.